Hello, how are you today?
I am doing spectacular. It is Thursday. It is hot, but it's sunny weather. How are you doing?
I'm great. I'm actually at the end of my official work week
Yay.
because tomorrow's a holiday, and so that's good.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
yeah. Since the 4th is on Saturday, we have tomorrow off, and then because of the recent situations, um, our company has given us Monday off as well, so we have 2 days off.
Wow, a 4-day weekend.
Yeah,
Wow. Boy,
I'm
you could
excited.
only close yourself up with a good book for those 4 days and drift off.
Isn't that the truth? I will be inside because it's way too hot to be outside.
It is. It's brutal out there.
Yes, indeed.
Well, I am super pumped about this topic today because it's the next step in this whole emotional intelligence journey we're taking. It's all about self-management. We had self-awareness last week, and this or last Tuesday, and this week it's self-management. And personally, I think that's something that we give ourselves more credit for than we're actually good at.
Well, that's interesting that you say that, because I think you're probably right to some degree. As I was preparing for today, I looked at some of the strategies and things we're going to talk about, and I think, yeah, I probably better be a little bit more conscious about some of these. So let's get into the topic.
Let's do it.
So, as you said, today last time we talked about self-awareness, and today we're talking about self-management. Here in this slide, it says self-regulation, but it's the same thing, right? To be aware of our emotions and be able to control our reaction and the intensity of our emotion and the appropriateness of our emotion in the moment. That's basically what the topic is surrounding today. And that is a big one, right? As you said, we probably all don't do as well as we may think we do, because there are several steps. And the first one is we have to recognize that we are having the emotion and what kind of emotion it is. And then we have to accept that our feelings are okay, right? We're all human. We all get feelings, but the key to success and improving our ability to relate with others is to manage that, understand what caused the emotion. And we mentioned a little bit of this last time, is to look at what caused the emotion, not why did I get the emotion. We all get emotional, but we don't all have the same triggers, right? We talk about some people have the patience of Job, right? It takes a lot to make them visibly angry. Well, that's the impression they give us, but maybe they just have a better handle on their emotional triggers than some of the rest of us, right? They recognize that not everything needs to put them into an emotional state.
Right.
And you have to then learn to control your reaction to the trigger that you have. So these are the steps to managing emotions. But before we talk about some strategies of how to control them and manage them, let's talk about emotions themselves. Because, there are basically a finite set of emotions, but we have lots of words to describe them. And they have varying levels of intensity. And when we talk about controlling our emotions, we're talking about controlling those that are detrimental to us and to others, right? If you're overly elated, right? I was ecstatic. I was happy for my daughter when she got engaged, right? And for her fiance, I was happy for them. Well, I didn't temper my display of happiness, right? Because that was encouraging to them and the proper response to the moment. But if you look across this spectrum, happy, sad, angry, think about when we were a kid, right? And they would ask us, how are we feeling today? and it's a smiley face, a straight across if you're just okay or average. It's a frown if you're sad. You know, it's another expression if you're afraid or if you're angry. But looking down each of the columns at the intensity, and I tried to break apart, you know, some of, and this came from one of the books that I referenced during our first session, the emotional intelligence discussions. And then I sort of combined a couple of different lists to bring these two together. But looking at just this, and this is not a full exhaustive list, you know, there's a lot of emotions here. And some of them are extreme, that are high intensity, right? When you're angry, you're furious, you want to throw things, you're enraged. I mean, that's a high intensity. When we're afraid, that's our natural instinct, right? The highest intensity, that's our fear of flight, right? That's our natural fear of being harmed or injured, or in some cases, people have a fear of things that they just don't understand, and it terrifies them. Any thoughts about this?
Yeah, you know, when I first saw this, I was like, wow. And my first reaction was, look at the various emotions, a number of emotions out there. But then when you look at the angry column, when I looked and I saw that being upset, being mad, being frustrated, being disgusted, being agitated is a medium feeling, I thought, you got to be kidding. And then I realized that's just telling me there's so much, it could be so much worse. It could be so much worse. And that's when I think when you get to that high level is when you have, for lack of a better analogy, those out of body experiences, and you just do things and then you collapse and don't remember what you did because you were so vehemently angry. But, you know, I look at this and I think that even with any, I'm happy, sad, ashamed, afraid, any of those, I think we spend the most of our time in that medium column or medium row there. And we don't really realize what it takes to get to that upper level, be it good or be it detrimental. So even like with happy, yeah, we're cheerful, we're gratified, we feel good about what we're doing, we're satisfied, but are we passionate? Are we really out there living our why?
Yeah, exactly. You know, we've talked about finding our passion, finding our why, and that when those things align, when your skill set aligns with what you're doing and why you want to do it, when those things come together, that truly is your sweet spot. That's your area of passion. And that's when you're likely to be the most elated, the most overjoyed, the most energetic, right? And you're likely to have better control over all the other emotions that might come along as distractions, all the other triggers that might try to distract you, because that one is so powerful that it outweighs the other distractions as they come along. So somebody may come along and make you frustrated, but you don't really give it too much of a time of day. You kind of let it roll off because you're so intense in your passion. And you're absolutely right. I do think that, you know, there are multiple ways to look at this. And as a person is thinking about the emotions that they're feeling at any particular time, because we all go through the spectrum. Some of us have fewer occurrences where we get a high intensity across that spectrum, but we also may be those people that have fewer low intensity as well. But in the case of being sad, right? We talk about people being moody, that they can change their mood on a flip of a dime.
Right.
Well, that's a low frequency maybe, right? Because it doesn't really last long. It's short. And we talked about the fact that our emotions are temporary because they change. But what we're trying to do is gravitate towards that middle and gravitate towards where we can be cheerful, gratified, good, right? Relieved and satisfied or elated. You want to gravitate towards that upper left to middle left as much as possible, or even the low, right? There are some things you can be contented with.
In fact, when I look at this and I think about that one of the first slides where you defined what is self-regulation, self-maintenance, self-management, and the phrase there, it was the ability to think before acting.
Mm-hmm.
Even in the low category, you are thinking before acting. Because here's what I think happens. If you're disappointed, if you're uptight, if you're anxious, if you're uncomfortable, you're probably thinking to yourself, should I, shouldn't I say anything? Should I or shouldn't I act? You're in that low category, but you're still a step ahead of where you would be if you just did something without thinking. You're a step ahead of it.
Yep. And the other thing this brought to my attention is, you hear, and I've said it myself, I'm so furious, I'm so angry, right? And if furious is that high intensity, I'm using that word, but that really doesn't represent how I'm truly feeling at that moment.
Exactly.
What I really am is probably more frustrated. So that's because our minds listen to our self-talk. One of the things, as I was looking at this matrix, I'm like, I need to use the proper words. If I'm vocalizing how I'm feeling, I need to get familiar with these and recognize
That's awesome.
the intensity of what I'm really feeling, because maybe I'm really not. Maybe I'm not even frustrated. Maybe I just need to say, that's annoying. And what does that do for me? If I say it's annoying, right? Then it's little. It's
that
small.
Right there. I never thought of this. You just opened up a whole box for me right there. That's an affirmation. So you're affirming to yourself, I'm really only annoyed. I'm not 99% pissed off. I'm only annoyed. So even in those 4 categories to the right there, the sad, angry, afraid, ashamed, which are areas of uncomfortableness, or areas of where we tend to lose sight of our real emotions. There's affirmations to be had there. Rather than saying, I'm just scared to do this, maybe the affirmation is, I'm just a little nervous. I'm a little worried about this. And that's a much more powerful affirmation than saying, I feel threatened, or I am petrified or horrified.
And it makes it seem much more like a speed bump than a mountain to get over.
Oh boy, that's a great one. That's a great one. You're exactly right. Wow.
Yep.
Hey, we got a bunch of people already joining us here. Let me give some shout out here to Yvette, Richard, Bradley. Hey, Brad, Michael, Sue, Tanisha, and another Sue. I mean, wow, this is awesome.
Wow. I got Becca over here on this side.
Very cool.
So yeah, keep this in mind as we go here into the next section, and we're gonna hear some more about it and talk some more about how to manage these across the spectrum. So when you accept your feelings, right, that's where one of the necessaries in order to manage them. But if you're denying your feelings, what happens, right? You tend to suppress the unpleasant experiences. You may withdraw. This is where you may project your faults onto other people around you. Or this last one really got me. You may compensate for your weaknesses by giving gifts, working harder, and having that enabling type of personality, because you're not in touch with your feelings, and or you're not willing to acknowledge and deal with those feelings and the relationships that you have. I mean, each section that we go through here, we're getting a hint of the next section, because honestly, it isn't until we get through the whole circle of things that we can really put it all together.
Mhm.
But this too made me stop and think, especially this last one. I get it that when we're emotional, we're feeling down or whatever, we'll pull away. We repress. That's just a human nature thing to want to repress those things that are unpleasant. But this last one, compensating for our weakness by giving gifts, working hard, or giving more effort than you probably need to, right? Maybe this is where the should haves and could haves come in. Shoulda, coulda, woulda.
Well, in fact, when you said that, and it really brought back just a recent event for me out running some errands and doing some things for someone that can be real annoying. And I was more caught up in that, and I was suppressing those unpleasant experiences when going from store to store in the strip center. And the last store in the strip center is that very exclusive place called Target. And right outside of Target, there was this young man, probably 14, 15 years of age, what looked like his mother, and he was playing the violin, and just the most beautiful
Oh,
music
wow.
coming from the violin. It reminded me of the artists you see in the subways in New York. And it was just the most incredible, pleasant music. And he had his violin case open, and people were putting money in there. So I reached in my pocket. I only had a couple of dollars. I never carry cash with me, but I took them out and I put them in his case. I have no idea what the purpose was, no idea what the cause was, but I gave him those gifts because he changed my emotions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. And of course, when we accept our feelings, it's easier to bounce back. We've talked a lot about that, but this compensating one, this one really stuck with me personally,
Yeah.
I think.
That's a good one.
Yeah. So how do you understand what your triggers are, right? We mentioned this last time. You want to journal events that trigger certain emotions. Watch the intensity. And I even put down here to journal a managed reaction. And I'm going to give you an example, right? Somebody cuts you off when you're talking. What's your initial emotion? You're frustrated. You might not be infuriated. You might get yourself to an infuriated state if you never deal with it each time somebody cuts you off. Because what does it do? It stays inside. It builds up and it builds up and it builds up, and that raises the intensity. So how do you manage that reaction? Maybe you stop the person and say, let me finish my sentence, please, first. Or maybe you let them finish talking and then you say, okay, now I want to go back and finish what I was saying before I was interrupted. I mean, that, depending on who you're talking to, you give them an acknowledgement that you recognize they cut you off. Maybe I just put your boyfriend, could be your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your mother, your friend, whoever it is, somebody you texted hasn't answered the text. We're so inclined to think, because we have these phones in our hands, right? And we had the free time to text somebody. We're so inclined to think that they should be immediately texting us back.
Right.
And if they don't text us back within 15 minutes, we think, oh, well, they don't care about us. And that's probably not at all true. You don't know what they were doing. We just have this expectation. So your initial emotion, without thinking, you might say, oh, I wonder what they're doing. Oh, they might be talking to somebody else. Oh, they just don't care about me. They're out having a good time. Or, you're feeling ignored. All of these emotions that could be there. So think in advance, how should I probably manage that better? Wait a reasonable time. Call the person. If you want to talk to them, mix it up. Try calling them. Try messaging them. Ask them, wait, but wait a reasonable time and ask for a response. Text them again if you need to. Say, hey, just want to make sure you're okay. If you don't have time to talk, just give me a high sign to let me know you're all right, whatever. There's a lot of things you can do there. But in the moment, we can get ourselves all worked up holding this phone, saying, why haven't they texting, checking our messages? Why haven't they answered? Why haven't they answered? Now, we all know that there are those people, right, who never answer a text. You may throw a text out, throw a text out, throw a text out, and they never answer. If you know they don't text, then you're just throwing something into an empty trash can because you can't expect that they're going to do something different just for you. But if you know they text other people, right, and they don't text you back, then I think, you have a right to be frustrated. And that's where you have to acknowledge that emotion. And maybe that's where if you really want to talk to them and talk through it, call them. You may be thinking they got your text. It may show that they got your text, but maybe for some reason they didn't. We never know. So you got to connect with the person in a different way. And suppose someone is giving you advice. I just threw these scenarios. We could probably talk all day long about different scenarios. But, we come home, we vent, right, from work, or we have something happen to us, we vent for the day. And those listening might think, oh, we need to help them solve this. They're trying to figure out what their answer is going to be. And maybe that isn't at all what we wanted. We just wanted to talk. We just wanted to get it out of our head. So when they give us the advice, we're feeling like, oh, well, I guess I didn't handle that right. Oh, man, I'm not good enough to do this. When that wasn't the person's intent at all. So from our perspective, how we can manage and deflate that and not incur that emotion, speak what it is, our purpose, before we start talking. I just need to vent. I just need somebody to listen. Your thoughts?
I love these. I mean, a couple things come to mind as you were going through these. One is, whatever your trigger is, you have to own it. You have to own that, and you have to also own that you have some ownership. You have some responsibility for that trigger ever taking place.
Yep.
If someone cuts you off when you're talking, there's something about your emotional intelligence there that tells them it's okay to do that with you. I'll give you another example. The whole texting thing. I was speaking with a lady yesterday, and we're talking about what she does, what I do. We found a lot of synchronicity. And when it got through, she said, by the way, I need to tell you, she said, I rarely read my emails. So if you want to get in contact with me, send me a text message. That solved that. Mm-hmm. That solved it, up front what it is. And then the other thing was, and some people on the thing, and Darius has joined us. Welcome, Darius. May not understand this, but someone once told me that the only person who ever truly appreciated triggers was Roy Rogers. You know who that is? Trigger was Roy Rogers' horse. That was the only person that ever really appreciated Trigger, was Roy Rogers.
And I think, as we're thinking, you said a very true statement, that we have to own our emotions and what triggers us. Mm-hmm. And if we give thought ahead of time, that's why, we talk about how journaling helps all of us, and right. Our mind processes information more thoroughly as we write. So if you give yourself time to journal and just think, what kinds of activities cause your emotions to spike, mm-hmm. right? And recognize what kind of emotion you have. Notice I didn't put infuriated, right?
Right.
I didn't, but on the first one, but if that happened to me over and over and over with the same person, and I don't say anything, then I'm likely to be infuriated. So the point of journaling and looking at it ahead of time when you're not in the emotional state is to help you do a little bit of self-analysis and understand what these triggers are and what kind of, and be honest right? This is for you. So if you truly do feel infuriated and you feel like throwing something, if somebody cuts you off, then be honest and put that down.
And I would even add that if that is where you are, if you're so infuriated, realize that you are not infuriated at the person who cut you off. You're infuriated at yourself for not saying anything earlier on.
Ooh, could be. Very well could be. And I would say that if you are infuriated with one occurrence, if it only takes one occurrence, then you might need to check.
Yes,
Because
absolutely.
it might not be the only trigger might not be that they're cutting you off. There might be another trigger there. That's a whole lot deeper, that it doesn't have anything to do with them.
Exactly.
That you haven't recognized or owned yet. So if the emotion doesn't, as you lay it out, and if you're honest, if the emotion doesn't fit the trigger, look a little deeper.
Yeah. I worked with a guy once, and I love Donald. He was one of the most amazing people I ever worked with. And he had a saying, and it was, a little bit of their gravy goes all over my plate. And what he was telling me was, there's just something about them. I don't know what it is, but whatever they do, it just doesn't settle with me. And I think about that when you mention things like that, a little bit of their gravy goes all over my plate. If that's the case, then learn how to work yourself around those people.
Right, exactly. So there's a lot of different ways, and we've talked through some of them, and some of them we haven't quite hit on yet. Pausing. If you're finding yourself in an emotional situation, just take a pause. Stop talking. Take a breath, right? And consciously and quickly try to think what's triggering me to get upset. And hopefully then you can get a handle on it. Breathe and respond as you go to it. Or separate yourself. When you're hitting those higher intensity, sometimes you have to step away. Right? Sometimes you have to say, you know what? I cannot address this right now. Because I'm not going to let my emotions speak and drive my decision or drive my reaction. And now I'm too emotional, so I have to step away and give it time, give it some space. Maybe you don't have to sleep on it, walk away for 10 minutes, whatever it takes. But sometimes you have to separate yourself in order to be able to assess it and respond rationally without as much intense emotion. Don't make assumptions. Don't make assumptions. And I didn't put this on here, but think about that matrix and think about the words that represent the levels of intensity. And if you want to verbalize, watch the words you're choosing. Don't choose those high intensity words if you're not really in that high of a state, because you can work yourself into it by just continuing to use those words.
Right.
And again, the less intense words that you use, the emotion and the trigger and the challenge will seem more like a speed bump. So definitely improve your self-talk with the statements and say, I can manage this. When it's a small thing, I know how to deal with this. And it helps if you've journaled ahead of time, right? If you've thought through some of the triggers, and if something happens during a day, write it down. Add to your journal. That's the way you learn about yourself. Just be honest. And you said it, accepting responsibility for your actions, but you don't have to accept responsibility from everybody else's, right? But you have to own what is yours to own. You can't control everything.
Right.
You have to accept the fact, because a lot of people, the trigger is that they don't have control. The trigger is that they're dealing in a situation where somebody else has the power to make the decision and they don't like what they decided. Well, that's life. That's life. So you have to accept that there are some things you can't control, and don't allow your emotions to take over when it wasn't in your power to control it in the first place. Ask other people. If you're really trying to understand yourself better and whether you present yourself as a highly emotional person, ask others, hey, do I overreact in certain situations? Ask them for some examples. But if you do this, be ready for their answer. Own their answer, because their perception is your reality.
Mhm.
And remember that they're normal. Emotions are normal. We're not trying to tell anybody. If you're an overly emotional person and you haven't learned to manage your reaction to them yet, that's okay. It's a journey. It's a journey. It takes time, takes conscious thought, takes effort. We all have emotions. Doesn't mean we don't have them. And it doesn't mean that everybody who doesn't express their emotions is well managing them, because we can see that they could be suppressing or running from their emotions. We never know. All you can know is what you have, how you're managing. Any thoughts?
The thought I have, and it's something, again, a mentor once taught me, when you go through all these emotions here, whatever the situation is, if you think you're at the end of the rope and you just can't take it anymore, ask yourself this question: is what that is going on, is that going to make my mortgage or my rent increase? And if the answer is no, then it's probably not that important. And I've thought about that several times. You put in perspective, is what's going on, is what's happening right now going to prevent you from continuing to improve, continue to be a person, can prevent you from living your life and the daily expenses, the daily ways of living? If the answer is no, then it's probably not that critical, that important. Take it down a notch or two.
Right. And remember too that, we have not said you should never show emotion. I want to go back to that just as a final reminder.
Right.
When tragic things happen, of course, you're going to be emotionally upset and you're going to be extremely sad. And that's okay to express that emotion.
Right.
That's okay. We all do. What we're talking about is understanding those triggers and keeping yourself more aligned to the middle of the road, so that as we go forward through our discussion, you learn how to manage within your environment.
Right.
And you learn how to recognize in the moment if your emotions have taken over inappropriately for the situation.
Absolutely.
That's what we're really talking about here. So just a few things to leave the viewers with thoughts. This one from Will Smith. The question isn't, can you handle the situation? The question is, can you handle your mind? Can you manage the thoughts and emotions that are trying to poison your progress?
I love that.
And one other one.
Smith. And by the way, just a side note on Will Smith, guys, if you need some inspiration, if you want some true personal development out there, go to YouTube and Google Will Smith. He's got some amazing lessons out there he teaches. Just amazing.
Cool. I'm going to have to do that.
Yeah.
And I don't know Peggy McCall, but she's got a good first name. Over time, I discovered that as overwhelming as emotions may seem, we have the power to manage them, just as we have the potential to create our own destiny.
Oh, I love that. Hey, and Andrew's joined us, and Andrew has a thought. I love this. He says, an appropriate tempered emotion for a given situation will be to maintain your posture and keep your cool.
Great. Absolutely. That's a good summary. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Keith joined us too. I love both these quotes here, Peggy.
And welcome Tommy to the call as well. So that's it for me for today. As far as managing our emotions.
One closing thought too, and when you first started with this, I thought about it. It's one of my favorite quotes I use every year with my stuff. It comes from that amazing artist called Usher. We all know Usher and love his music, and Usher just sums it up. He says, sometimes your mouth is moving faster than your brain. You just have to slow it down.
Yep. 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 That's a good one. That's a good one. So, we're going to next time talk about empathy.
Ooh,
Yeah.
I love
We're
that.
working our way through,
Mhm.
but that'll be after the 4th.
That's right. It will be after the 4th.
Yeah. So unfortunately, in the current situation, a lot of the July 4th celebrations have been canceled, but I invite you all to enjoy your weekend, stay safe, celebrate the independence of our country, look for ways to stand up for equality and equity for all people, for
That's
all human
definition of
beings.
empathy right there.
Yeah,
Yep.
definitely.
Yeah. One of
Definitely.
my favorite fourth grade jokes is, does Europe have a 4th of July? And most people say, no. But the answer is yes, they just don't celebrate it.
Right. Right.
So,
That's true.
but I loved your comment there about just consider who you're around, just consider how you want to be treated, and realize that other person is also a person.
Yep. Absolutely.
Mm.
So for that, we'll end the week. Stay tuned next week, Tuesday and Thursday. We'll be back, same time, same channel.
Everyone have a great weekend. Peggy, you enjoy your much deserved 4-day weekend.
Thank you. Thank you. You enjoy yours as well.
I will.
I know we'll be talking.
Absolutely, we will be talking. We'll be on a call later on tonight together, I do believe.
We will. Yes, we will.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Good night. Thanks.